Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl. This is the time of year where we express our thanks for all that we have, our experiences, and for those in our lives. Well, I'm thankful for all of you who have been listening to this show and giving support. We're 5 years into Drink Beer, Think Beer now, and to celebrate that, I've asked back the first guest from the first show. It's Matt Brynildson of Firestone Walker, and he's here for a conversation. I'm enormously grateful, and you'll hear it all in just a moment. First, thanks to this episode's sponsor, Pinter. Ever wanted to brew your own beer but didn't know where to start? No tubs, no tubes, and no science degree required. Skip the confusion and get straight to the fun with the Pinter. Brew your own fresh beer and impress your friends with craft brews from top breweries like Appalachian Mountain Brewing. It's that easy. This Black Friday, you can grab the Pinter and 2 beer packs. That's 24 pints for just $49. Plus, get free delivery when you go directly to try.pinter.com/DBTB or use the code DRINKBEER49. But hurry, stocks are almost gone for the year, and I've heard they're down to the last few units. Don't miss out. Grab your Pinter today and start brewing your best beer yet. A reminder, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. You can find original articles, reviews, news, insights, and podcasts. Listen to shows like Brew to Brewer and the All About Beer podcast simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to shows. Follow All About Beer on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at All About Beer. And as always, you can keep up with all of the smoked beer news and releases by checking out This Week in Rauk Beer. Search the group on Facebook or follow at TW Rauk Beer on X, Threads, Instagram, and more. Glassware and apparel is available too on allaboutbeer.com/merch. And to help keep the content fresh, a few bucks goes a long way. Visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer and you can help fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. If you are familiar with modern American beer, Matt Brynildson needs no introduction. He's one of the most thoughtful, celebrated, and inspirational brewers working today. He began his brewing career with the Kalamazoo Spice Extraction Company as a hop chemist. He then attended the Siebel Institute of Brewing Technology and later joined Goose Island, where he was the head brewer of the Fulton Street Production Brewery from 1996 until 2000. In 2001, he joined Firestone Walker Brewing Company as the Brewmaster, a job that continues to this day. His Brewmaster office is even on the official tour. If you see him, please don't tap on the glass. He's the 2007 recipient of the Brewers Association Russell Shearer Award for Innovation in Brewing and has more medals to his name than is possible to count in a simple introduction like this. We recorded the show on a recent evening, and originally I had the idea to talk about 2 beers I opened, Parabola and Paraboloid. We didn't really get around to it, but the beers did get to me in a bit. So I hope you enjoy. Here's our conversation.
This is Matt Brynildson sitting in the Brewmaster office of Firestone Walker Brewing Company.
Is it actually called the Brewmaster office?
It says that outside the door. Yeah, it says right there. It says Brewmaster. So I just happen to be the guy sitting in it.
do people have to ask your permission to go in there? Like, is this?
Well, I don't lock it.
Share this, right?
Okay, yeah, no, I don't lock it. People want to come in and check it out. It's funny because I'm on the tour, so I have a window that faces out.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna change this, but I put all the awards in the window. Not because I was trying to show off the awards, but more so I had something between me and all these faces staring in at me. And they literally stop the tour outside my office and look at me like I'm an animal in a zoo or something. And I can hear them talking about me. It's the worst.
But there must be people on that tour who are like super beer nerds who just lose it at the very sight of you.
No, I don't know about that, but
Telejoni calls it the Santa Claus effect.
I'll be on a call like this, and then I see I just catch out of the corner of my eye, and someone's waving at me, trying to get my attention. I'm like, hey, hello. So, yeah.
And it's a home brewer who really wants you to try their brown ale that they smuggled in on the tour. Yeah. Or let me say 5 years later, thanks for being back on the show.
It's really a pleasure.
So much has changed in that 5 years. I don't think when we were together in Antwerp that the word COVID was even a thought in anybody's mind at that point. And then
No.
obviously everything has changed so much, and the industry especially. And I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of the brewery at this point in it, but you are well traveled, you are well respected, you are well read. You think about the industry, as sort of a game of three-dimensional chess. Is my take on it. There's so much uncertainty as we head into 2025. Then I'm wondering from your perspective, where you focusing your thoughts? Where do you want to see beer go? Where do you hope it goes? What are you as a brewer focusing on when, again, externally there's so much happening, you know, and a
Yeah.
lot of worry in the industry?
No, I think it would be really easy to, put the blinders on and get a little bit of a tunnel vision into everything that's not going right in the moment for craft beer. But both you and I, we've been around for a long time. I mean, I got started in the business in the mid '90s, and we've been through um, some times similar to this. No, never exactly the same, but I have a lot of faith that beer's been with us for a really long time. It just never really goes away, especially good beer. And my recollection from the last cycle or two was that the brewers who stayed focused on quality, you hear this all the time, but stay focused on quality, know what they're good at, and and stick to it, usually survive. And that being said, if if you don't evolve, you do go the way of the dodo bird. So you have to, it's all about balance, right? I mean, you got to keep the things that got you here tuned up and fresh, and make sure that you're still presenting all of that well. Meanwhile, you stretch a little bit and try some new things. And I think what really, is reassuring to me is getting out of the brewery and traveling. And I just got back from a trip to Australia, and I don't have to travel very far. I can just go down the road here in California. I go down to LA and visit Highland Park, or I can go up the road here and visit Alvarado Street or up to Cellar Maker. And there are plenty of examples of small brewers making exceptionally good quality beer, and more than just surviving, like doing really well, and playing to their audience and their fan base. So, maybe we have to get a little creative. I think it's a little tougher for the larger breweries like ours, only in that, you know, there's a lot of mouths to feed, and there's a lot of, there's just a lot of inertia, and it's hard to turn this boat quickly. You don't want to. So, you have to be patient.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I see a lot of light. I don't think it's going to be. It's not all doom and gloom. We're just kind of going through another cycle.
I want to talk to you about quality though, because it's one of those words that keeps coming up, right? And the brewers that consistently do well at awards, or the ones that wind up on best of lists, or the ones that I'm excited to talk to on the show or feature on All About Beer or whatever, quality is probably the first word that comes to mind. And I know I've told this story before, but years ago at the Craft Brewers Conference, Paul Gatso, when he was at the BA, was speaking to the crowd. I forget where we were at the time, but he said, "If quality isn't your number one concern, this isn't the room for you to be in, and get out." And people laughed, like they thought that it was a joke. Like there's laughter that went through the room, and I was struck in that moment of like, wow, people aren't taking this seriously when they really should. It's easy to say focus on quality. Where do you put that into practice at the brewery, or you as a brewer? What do you look for when you walk into a brewery, when you're talking to a brewer, when you're drinking a beer? Like what sort of ticks those boxes of like, okay, these folks are doing it right, we're doing it right. we can be doing it better. Here's how we could be doing it better.
Well,
That's like a 19-part question, and
yeah, and I don't know if I'm
you can
gonna.
grab any one of those, and
Okay.
yeah.
No, I mean, so having been a brewer, always been focused on the production of beer in a relatively large craft brewery, but small by large brewery. I mean, it, just kind of the general quality program that we build, we always talk about like our quality window needs to be small so that when we hit outside of it, we're still striking in what would be an acceptable larger target for the general industry. I don't know if that makes sense, but I mean,
It doesn't. So I'm going to ask you to clarify that.
well, I mean, so I'm talking more about the nuts and bolts of how we try to define quality in our brewery. And if that's like the analytical and the microbiology side of the business, and maybe most importantly, sensory,
Okay.
what makes this beer the beer it is. And let's, if we're trying to strike a target, then let's try to make that target as small as we possibly can that we can consistently hit within, so that when, if ever, we fall outside of that, we're not so far that we can't either sell that beer or bring it in and get back to sellable beer really quickly. And so
Okay.
I guess when I visit other breweries, and if they have a little bit of a lazier approach to that, where they just haven't really thought about it or set that target, then when we get in these times when we're moving away from the things that we're most comfortable with, the beers that, built the brewery, I'll use 805 as our example. We know that beer inside out and backwards, but some of our innovation beers that have come up, and then when you get in these stressful times, you tend to innovate a little more quickly, maybe even then your quality department can keep up with, in terms of like building beers that you can consistently put out. You start moving yourself out of the comfort zone, and you can wake up and find yourself, yeah, just outside of that target. And I almost everyone in the industry uses Ken Grossman as this great example of a brewer who seemingly has always been laser focused on the target, understands how far out of the comfort zone you can move before you need to kind of pull on that leash and bring it back in a little bit. And
Hmm.
again, I think that's the real trick in these times, is being innovative and keeping up with all the things that are going on and still producing core quality products. And if you can learn that, and that takes building a team. I don't know, maybe even the last time we talked 5 years ago, but certainly 10 years ago, we didn't really have a dedicated research and development team or an innovation team. It was kind of myself and, two or three brewers that really cared about or traveled well and knew beer, coming up with a new recipe. Now we have dedicated personnel in the brewery, and most brewers our size would, that are, you know, 40 hours a week working on innovation and trying to, interface with marketing and sales to find out what they're looking for, what their needs are, what they're seeing out in trade, and building beers for that. And as we've had to reboot the quality department as a result, to make sure that we can test for and work within, all this new territory. It's a challenge. It can be a challenge for an old dog like myself, who got real used to just water, malt, hops, and yeast, and now we're integrating fruit, and we're integrating, we're doing kind of blends outside of the norm, and yeah, just trying to innovate really, really quickly. So
And it sounds like some of that is being led by what your team is seeing out in the world. So if, you know, a certain kind of fruit seems to be testing well, or somebody else has hit on gold with something, it's like, okay, well, let's see how we can put our stamp on it. Is that fair?
oh yeah, I mean, there's, again, there's this kind of constant conversation going on with our sales and marketing team. And it's not, we've never been a brewery that's been all things for all people. We're just, we're not that broad in what we do, but you look at our portfolio, and it's definitely expanded out there, even within the 805 world, where we just had what we call 805 original, or the 5% blonde ale. We now have cerveza, which incorporates some lime, and we have a non-alcoholic. These are two things that, I 10 years ago I would have told you I'd never do, and here we are, lining them up with our best-selling beer. And we've also taken on Cali Squeeze, probably since you
Yeah.
and I last talked. That's a line of fruited beers, and it's like 1999 all over again. That these are back out there, but we want to do them really well. And so that's throwing a curveball at us. Um, you know, Hey, by the way, we're making hazy IPAs and all sorts of innovation in that space. So it's
So
a lot to keep track
yeah.
of. But if anybody's complaining about being bored because beer sales are down, I don't know what they're talking about because we're busier than we've ever been just trying to keep up with innovation. So
Wasn't there a time though where, because I'm curious about the tail wagging the dog, or vice versa, where we, the drinker, trusted the brewers to give us something interesting to drink, right? I don't necessarily trust other people, or a herd mentality. And so if I'm curious about like the marketing team going out and saying like, oh, right now yuzu is where it's at, or like whatever it is, blood orange is the next, Asian pear, like whatever it is. Um, I'm wondering like, does something get lost in translation where there's an uptick because somebody else has had success that's kind
yes,
of artificial? And yeah, does the
I think
brewer's
so.
is the brewer's voice getting lost?
No, no, I mean, well, I can't speak for all organizations. I
Okay.
think within ours, I mean, it could appear that way with certain organizations, and I think
Hmm.
that's something that we're very aware of, that it can happen, and it's an open conversation where that's where the R&D team is the buffer between, because we can have these innovation meetings where marketing and sales has seen that new bright shiny thing that they must have, and we can say, okay, well, you're not gonna get it tomorrow. We'll plug it into R&D and do our due diligence, do our research, see if it's something that fits even within the brewing tools that we have. Um,
And talk
that
to you in 8 months. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we try to innovate as quickly as we possibly can. I think that's still the fun of being a craft brewer, is that we're able to innovate. Hopefully we're able to fail quickly so we can get onto the right track if it's not
Yeah.
going to work. And it shouldn't take 8 months or 2 years to get something out there. And we're also blessed with having three tap rooms in close
Sure.
proximity to the brewery, so we can kind of test these things on our own turf, um, just to make sure that there's some sense to it all, and get some feedback from people who know our beers well, and get a chance to look at a beer board with that on it and see how it lines up with the rest of the portfolio. I mean,
Yeah.
we've gotten pretty organized, and I don't know if this is the direction the conversation was going to go, but we've kind of subdivided our portfolio into what we call brand pillars, and we have rules within those brand pillars. And there's a brand pillar like Firestone Walker, like the original beers, the OG beers, which we don't allow a lot of stuff. We don't do, obscenely fruited things or really sweet things. I mean, these are the sacred beers. They're, double barrel ale and Union Jack and Pivo, and
DBA and yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They live in that kind of sacred pillar. And 805 is in another relatively sacred pillar, although I just talked about doing a fruited lager beer and NA, but
Yeah.
we know what can happen in that. And then we have Cali Squeeze and Mind Haze, and we've purposely kind of set those in their own categories where we can go a little more audacious, big fruit in the Cali Squeeze and do some strange stuff there, even seltzer if we wanted to. And Mind Haze is an IPA category that, will allow fruit, coconut, all sorts of other crazy things. And that's where, you talk, maybe to tie it up together, you know, we're not blind. We saw what was coming out of Fort Collins, the Juice Force type beers.
The skeleton. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
And we
the
we
the
saw
Joe
that. We
Camel of
took
beer.
note.
Yeah.
Our marketing team couldn't stop talking about the fact that, there is something there. There's some magic we need to understand. And so, we launched, and I openly call it a FOCO IPA, a Fort Collins style IPA. We have Cosmic Crusher, which it's a very different beer if you tasted it side by side. We constructed it differently, but it certainly plays to that what I almost call like a whole new style or category. It's this higher alcohol. It calls itself an IPA, but it's really not as hop driven as you might think. It may include terps, fruit, or top notes, but it's a high ABV. It's a new ABV category. Very popular,
It is.
and we have a tool in the tool belt for that one. you know, we don't think we're going to take any like large market share away from them, but our fan base asked for it. Our marketing and sales team asked for it, and so we delivered something loosely built on that style and delivered it to our local market. It's not a nationwide launch or anything like that, but
Is it fair to call those beers like a hazy IPA or because like that's what's thrown around, right? The New England hazy, juicy, like whatever kind of thing.
yeah,
Is it a subcategory in that larger or just a category in and of itself? Like,
I think it's going to be recognized. Well, if it hangs in there, it could easily be recognized as its own style because it's not what we think of originally as juicy hazy IPA, at least from a brewer's
mhm.
perspective and how it's constructed. But it certainly took some influence from that. Um, and again, in the Mind Haze world where we make our hazy IPAs, we're it's okay to kind of blow it up and have fun with it and add crazy things. The customers that drink those beers and come looking for those beers are looking for innovation, and they're willing to accept things that are even like outside of normal beer. So
Well,
I
I mean, they're looking for flavor and a buzz. I mean, it's like I
yeah,
hang out at the
yeah.
playground with the New Balance dads, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. And all they want to do is talk to me about Juice Force, and I'm like, can we talk about something that
I mean, I
anything
totally
else,
get
like
it.
anything else,
I
please? But
totally get
yeah,
it that you and I don't want to talk about
no,
it, but
I
you're
I know
right.
I we're the minority now in this
I know.
conversation. Yeah.
And if David Walker was sitting in this interview, he would very eloquently somehow in his English accent let you know that beer has always been about flavor and craft beer and or craft beer specifically. And we got to get with the times. And it just happens that today something that's either sweet or highly alcoholic or really fruity beyond what you and I like has beer flavor. That's what's
Yeah.
popular right now. Um,
I just can't. Like it's just like I try, and it's like I don't go to a lot of parties, but you're at somebody's, some kid's birthday party and there's a cooler and I'm thinking like I'm looking at the options and I'm thinking like God, like I just want to get home to my own beer fridge. Like
I
Jesus Christ,
know,
this is
I
yeah.
know, but rather than just get mad and stand,
But then I drink them to try to understand it.
yeah,
And
yep.
and
And it's kind of
my blood
full
sugar
circle to your
spikes. Yeah.
original question. What do you do when times are like these and things are getting weird out there?
Yeah.
Um, we definitely dabble in it, and we acknowledge it, and we're a big enough brewery that I guess we can divert some resources to that. But the name of the game is don't take your eye off of all of those other beer flavored beers that we make and love and
So
sell.
yeah, and I want to talk about the beer flavored beers in a minute, but I want to go back to one other thing because you mentioned Ken Grossman and Sierra Nevada, and there was this sort of eye rolling that some people did, not me, but some people did when they came out with Hazy Little Thing. And it was, what does this 45-year-old brewery know about haze? Like they sure they invented pale ale in America, but like they don't know how the kids talk. It's that Lawrence Welk showing up and doing, I'm going to do that new jive that the kids do these days. But it sells really well now because they spent the time to focus in to understand what a hazy pale ale can be in the modern age,
Yep.
with the modern hops, with all of that. And you guys have done that with Mine Haze as well. You guys have done that with the IPAs as well. And when people think of Firestone Walker, I mean, I think we think of you and hops first and foremost, but maybe old school, or we think of barrel aged beer, or we think of 805, or we think of, any of these brand pillars that you were talking about. But as we head into 2025, you brewers, you can, I'll put New Belgium in this for the purposes of this conversation, but have figured out what started off as small brewery cachet. I'm going to stand in line for this. They've made 50 cases of it, and I'm going to buy a 4 pack and trade three for somebody else who stood in line for, their 4 pack and that kind of thing. And you've turned it into, okay, this is accessible for everybody, and it's better than standing in line for. That's my opinion in that whole thing. But I would rather drink your guys' hazies than roll the dice and spend $25 on a 4 pack of probably questionable IPA. And this kind of goes back to the quality thing as well,
Yeah.
of figuring out a style, figuring out how to put your DNA on it, figuring out what people want from that style, and then delivering it to them. And I imagine it's harder than most people think.
Well, I mean, I can speak to the Mind Haze experience,
Yeah.
and it
I'm not
took
asking
us
you to speak for Ken. That'd be
no.
fun though.
Yeah, and I think it's not their best-selling beer. It's right up there, right? I mean, it went from that thing you're like, oh, why is Sierra doing it, to wow, that's a major part of their
Yeah.
business plan.
And it's
And
not unlike what 805 was for you guys,
right,
where it's
yep,
like, oh, like what are you guys know about it? And I remember the
yep.
last time I was out visiting, and I think I told this story 5 years ago, was, half of the gift store was dedicated to 805, and I didn't realize just how big it was because I was in New Jersey at the point.
Yeah,
And, it's sometimes things, yeah, take off. But I think a whole new generation of brewers know, or drinkers know, hazy little thing, and maybe have never had a Sierra Pale in their lives.
right.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I interrupted you. Yeah.
No, no. I mean, I was going to say I can only, from our perspective, again, we weren't even a fast follower. We saw the hazy IPA train rolling, and maybe just like FOCO IPAs, didn't know where it was going to go. It just didn't seem like something that really made sense to us from our brewing, what we love to drink. But then you can't help but just watch this evolve and start to take root and go. And funny enough, like my aha moment was drinking. It was Gutmann, um, Weizenbach in Germany while I was over for the Brau one year, and everybody was talking about hazy IPAs. All the suppliers at the trade show were trying to figure out like how to build bigger hop guns and hop recirculation machines, and how do we market to these hazy IPA? And they're asking all these questions. And afterwards, I'm drinking a Gutmann Weizenbach, and I'm like, this thing's hazy. It's low in bitterness and just booming with esters and fruitiness. Now, it wasn't hop driven, but I finally got it all connected to me when I drank that beer. And I was like, we can go home and use these traditional methods to make this opalescent, hazy looking, smooth, delicious mouthfeel type of beer, and layer some hops into this. And I think that's, I had to, it is almost like I needed to figure out how it was done, in a traditional brewing world, to make sense of how to bring it back home.
Do,
and, but it was
do you,
also a stability question too, because the one thing we had noticed, and this is early days in hazy IPA, mind you, I mean, there are some amazing, examples of this in small breweries and large, but we realized like, we needed to create something that wasn't just going to be good for 30 days. It needed to be good for, 120, 150 days or whatever. So, we had to apply some technology. Centrifugation helped a great deal to help stabilize the product by removing yeast and not allowing yeast autolysis, making sure we had, extreme DO control with our higher technology fillers, all the way through to, on the dry hopping step. And, so we took everything we learned about making stable beer prior to that time, and then applied our version of a hazy IPA to it. And yeah, and now roll the clocks forward, it's our best selling IPA in the whole portfolio. So there you go.
what does that do to your brewer soul? Like
Was it?
remove the company from it for just a second, but as somebody who came up on IPAs, was synonymous with IPAs for a good part of your career, um, the hazy thing, does it feel good? Like, is this?
Well, I
I'm
mean,
not asking this in a snarky way. Like
yeah,
I know it is, and I should preface this that before we went on the air, I showed Matt what I was drinking for this show, and I don't often drink on this show anymore, but I have both Parabola of 2024 and Paraboloid. Yeah,
yeah,
Paraboloid, right? Yeah,
yep.
from 2024, in two separate glasses in front of me. So I realized that my tone might start to sound off, but I mean that like as a I remember your wife telling me once that you like your bedside reading was um like the hop crop reports kind of thing. And not to fall asleep, but like to stay up until 3 a.m. like a nerd, reading all of this stuff. So like that IPAs or regardless of its stripe, does this feel good? That
Well,
like it's
again,
still
like
yeah.
when it was happening, I struggled a little bit with it. Um, but now that I look back, and I think again back to like the brewers that I hold in high regard or the breweries I want to go visit, I like to see a brewer that's it's not just a one trick, pony or whatever you want to call it. It's somebody who can brew from, Pilsner beers and West Coast and hazy and barrel aged beer. And, that's the kind of brewery that we've tried to build here. And so we have our reservations about certain styles and certain ways of brewing. And I think at the end of the day, again, harping on quality, but just being able to be consistent and have some shelf stability, or we shouldn't be making it. Maybe the small brewer can be making it because it's a direct to consumer experience, whereas we're trying to put this out through grocery stores. Um, but I take a lot of pride in our team's ability to do pretty darn well in a number of different styles. Are we the best in every one of them? No, by no stretch. But I think we can hold our own in most of the beers that we're producing and the styles that we're producing. And I mean, I, I'm blessed. I work in a brewery that our best selling beer 805 is a relatively when I say easy, it's a low impact beer to produce. It's not massively hopped. It's not super high alcohol. It doesn't require extra long lagering. And it's afforded me the ability to keep, two really beautiful, well honed barrel programs going, even when barrel aged beers have kind of gone a little bit out trending wise in terms of, volume of sale. Um, and I keep a lot of IPAs going in this brewery, and maybe the tax I pay is having to make some fruit beers and an NA beer and some other things, but
I mean, I was going to
um,
ask you. You said, there's some beers or some beer styles with hesitation, and I was going to ask what those are. Um, if
you mean
any
that
come to mind.
that we're great at it, that part of it?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I'll just throw the fruited beers out there. I mean, our fruited beers sell really well, but we weren't doing it for a long time and then got into it really hard and fast. And I just realized like fruit by itself is a whole nother world. It's like,
yeah,
it's like getting into winemaking. I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole on fruit and how to bring delicious fruit character to a beer and still have drinkability and all these things. I mean, that is, that could be a life's work just right there. And trying to innovate in and around that area is, I don't know, for me, it's definitely outside of my comfort zone.
yeah,
So I'm not saying we're the world's best fruit beer brewer. I mean, Molly down at Barrel Works makes some delicious fruited beers, and Jim Crooks before her started that for us. We're much more comfortable in mixed culture and fermenting on fruit and taking a really ridiculous amount of time to produce a really stable and delicious product in a traditional way, but that's not what's selling really well in the market. What's selling really well are sweeter beers,
yeah,
um, fruits that we wouldn't have ever used in that program, like blood orange and things like this. Um, yeah, it's the steep learning curve there. But it's been fun.
yeah,
I enjoy the challenge. I still love this game. I love brewing. And I'm so blessed to have this amazing team around me that kind of affords us the ability to play in all these different sandboxes. It's a ton of fun. We haven't talked about the propagator yet.
I know because I wait, you keep introducing new rabbit holes and I keep chasing you down them. More in a moment, but first, thanks to Pinter for sponsoring this episode. Ever wanted to brew your own beer but didn't know where to start? No tubs, no tubes, and no science degree required. Skip the confusion and get straight to the fun with the Pinter. Brew your own fresh beer and impress your friends with craft brews from top breweries like Appalachian Mountain Brewing. It's that easy. This Black Friday, you can grab the Pinter and 2 beer packs. That's 24 pints for just $49. Plus, get free delivery when you go directly to try.pinter.com/DBTB or use the code DRINKBEER49. But hurry, stocks are almost gone for the year, and I've heard they're down to the last few units. Don't miss out. Grab your Pinter today and start brewing your best beer yet. All right, so let's just do a fast lightning round because I want to talk about barrels, but
Okay.
and you just sort of set that up that 805 sort of helps you play among the wood, and I like that. Um, NA beer, what does it take in this age to make one that stands above what's largely, in my mind, considered the riffraff?
Well, I'm still learning on that one. We just released 805.
Which I
We're
enjoyed drinking over the weekend, by the way, and
oh,
probably need
thanks.
now after prep. But yeah.
Well, maybe I can tell you what I know, and then there's a lot of stuff I don't know. I think that the hardest part about NA is that alcohol has a major impact on flavor, and it is, you've removed that from the program, and what you're left with can be either wordy, sweet, or just basically out of balance. And so it's always trying to find that balance point and create something that you want to drink more than one, And so that was the goal. Um, our team, we could have picked an easier route because we could have picked a hop forward NA, and at least I would have had hops to play with to either
Yeah.
complement or cover up the kind of innate, like, wordy character. But no, we chose 805 original as the NA we were going to try to pair with. So there's not a lot there to cover it up. And so what I found is that the yeasts, at least, so we're using a malto-negative yeast. We're not using, vacuum distillation or membrane separation. I'm not saying that we won't in the future, but we wanted to get into the market without, you know, buying into really expensive technology before we understood what kind of what an 805 lover is looking for. And so we're using a malto-negative yeast. We had to select a yeast that wouldn't produce a lot of phenolics. We needed to produce a yeast that was capable of making some fruity ester character like 805 has. And then we just worked really hard on balance. And I will say we're still working on it. I think it's something it's always a work in progress. There's always tweaks that can be made as we learn more, especially as this is out in trade longer and we're getting feedback from customers. But so far, it's been really positive. I drink a lot of it. Actually, I call it my chainsaw beer because you don't want to be drinking alcoholic beer while you're running a
Come on,
chainsaw.
live a little. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that as well. But the thing is, poured into the glass, it's got a nice head of foam on it. Like it
Yeah.
looks like a beer in the glass. And it has some body to it, which
Yep.
I find lacking in, a lot of the thin NAs that are out there.
Yeah. We tasted NAs exhaustively, and what we put in the can for 805 is the type of NA I enjoy. But there's
Yeah.
some amazing NAs out there now. Augustiner put out an NA
Oh,
within the last year or so. That's really good. You should be looking for that next time you're
yeah.
overseas. Yeah. So,
Um, Okay, I said lightning round, and now
oh, sorry.
this is like a long country storm, but this is fine. I imagine that most of the hop growers reach out to you when they have a new variety that's coming out, something that they want to have a little pizzazz behind. Of this new crop after the season in North America, just 2 months ago, are there any new hops that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, I mean, the two that come to mind right away aren't necessarily brand new, but one still experimental, 1019,
Okay.
HBC 1019. Really love that hop.
That's been around for a while though,
It
hasn't it?
has, yeah.
Yeah.
We integrated it into our latest luponic distortion. So I think that's a good example of how it's best used in a West Coast, and we're using it in a couple other beers. And then one that's not that has just recently named Crush, which was what 586 HPC 586. That's another one that not brand new, but this crop year was just smelling insane. Like you couldn't rub that hop and not want to buy some. So I think there's a really bright future for that hop.
Okay. You mentioned this at the top. You were in Australia. It's fun to travel. It's fun to get into other people's brew houses in other countries where their marketing team, their drinkers, their whoever are guiding them in different ways than maybe what's happening here. Having been back on US soil now for a week or so, what were you left with from your
Well, I
visit
mean,
down
this
under?
is this is another one of those opportunities like you get outside of the brewery and it was like a breath of fresh air that craft is alive and well in Australia. I can report back. It's not that they're not facing headwinds like we are here, just in
Yeah, I mean
terms of
it's yeah.
alcohol consumption habits. But I visited the three breweries I visited, which are kind of on in different parts of Australia, but um, the two in the Sydney region, I visited Topher at Wildflower, and he's a
Hmm.
small mixed culture brewer. So it's all about direct to consumer. It's like engaging directly with his consumer. He's doing great. His beers are absolutely beautiful. He'll be at the Invitational this year, so if you haven't tasted his beer, you should search him out. And then I went and saw DJ at Mountain Culture. 5-year-old brewery that's just been on this rocket ship ride and did so through hazy IPAs, making great beers, growing out of their pants, having a lot of fun doing it. And then I went out and visited Balter,
Oh,
which is
Scotty,
Gold.
yeah.
Yeah, Scotty at Gold Coast. That was the main reason for the trip. We did a collaboration with them, and we had an event pouring that beer. And he's just so hyper focused and making such great beers, especially his hop forward, kind of like West Coast inspired or at least American hop inspired beers. So it was just a joy to go out there, and quality was great. The vibe, the beer culture, at least within their sphere of influence, was really, really great. So it was a great trip.
All right. Let's talk about in the time that we have left, barrel aging. You put out your marketing team was very kind to send me some boxes over the course of this year of what do you call it? The Brewmasters Collective.
Brewmasters Collective. Yeah, we
It's a
started
little
a
Star
club.
Trekky. It's
It
it's like
is.
one of
I
us, like
know.
it's kind of the Borg, and I can like I can sort of
It's so
feel
tough.
like I can
Way,
feel the
way too many
like
pictures of me in those flyers too. You're like, oh
by
God.
the way, I mean, they're beautifully shot, but those are artistic of just your nosing glasses
Oh
like,
my God.
you're solving the world's
My
problems.
kids
Like
aren't
this
old
is
enough, but when they do get old enough, they're gonna make fun of me when they see those things. Yeah.
it deserved, but also kind of cool because you're the personality, right? Like, like I don't know if I could have done those with a straight face, so I'm glad that you could. But I love getting these beers, and the boxes are cool, and you're partnering with cool people. This is not a commercial that people should sign up for the 2025 thing, but if you do, you're not going to be disappointed because like it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
And the
and
beers that are in it,
that's
as you can hear from my rosy cheeks right now as I'm talking to you from this latest box. Yeah.
it was one of the positive things that came out of the whole COVID time, and the fact that we had to sideline a lot of our event staff, and we'd always wanted to do a club. We just hadn't had a lot of time to like figure out how to do it with beer, but we obviously have the example of all these local wineries here in California who thrive through their clubs. And I'd always been so jealous that they had a real one-to-one relationship with their customers. And, someone would visit the winery and have an amazing experience and join the club and go home and the wine was shipped to them. And we're in year 5 now. So, it's going really well. It's not a massive club, but it's enough that we can make very specific batches only for the club. They're all black labeled, so they have a different look than the rest of our beers, and we can spend a lot more money and time and effort on those beers. Yeah, it's been a blast. Jay-Z, Jordan Ziegler runs our spirits barrel programs, having a blast. Molly Reed.
Everybody got really excited for just a second and then stopped. But yes.
And then Molly Reed runs Barrel Works now, and I feel like we're producing the best beers we ever have out of the barrel programs.
Really?
And I do because we were starting to brew into a little bit of a
I don't mean
funnel.
that because of Molly. I just mean I'm just surprised, like, to
Yeah,
hear, because like
in
because
both programs. I mean, I
is that longevity?
attribute. Well, so we've got a lot of practice under our belt, but the club allows us to instead of thinking in terms of, okay, what's going to work in the broad market through these wholesalers and what are they going to receive, and we're going to have to be a little conservative. I can't afford to put all that vanilla and coconut into a 400 barrel batch of beer that's going to be out there at XYZ price point. Now I'm just making these small batches. If I can only get 5 barrels from this 15-year aged distilled spirit producer, great. I can make a beer with those 5 barrels. I don't know. It's just getting smaller and focusing on smaller volumes of beer allowed us to just really go all in on these beers. And we're just having a lot of fun.
And it sort of seems like it where you're messing around with. I mean, I had last week the Omnipolo beer with marshmallows and
Yeah.
coconut and like
Mellow
it.
mind control.
Yeah, but it's things that I don't necessarily think of with you in these very serious pictures that are,
No, I know. And
shadowed
so,
and all of that. I am the knight. Like it's that kind of thing where I'm, but it's got to add one kind of fun creativity to you, and two, it's going to folks who already are going to appreciate what shows up in
yeah.
this box no
No,
matter
that's
what.
the best part about it is those are like number one fans. They've joined the club. Most of them know Firestone, but even if they don't, like they love those kind of beers. And it's changed because not every beer is a collab, but there's a couple of collabs in every club release. And my new approach, relatively new approach to these collabs for the barrel program is to go to the brewer and be like, I'm not even going to suggest a recipe. You tell me, like, let's brew a beer that either is well within your wheelhouse, is really working for you and your brewery with your fans, or suggest something outlandish that you've never thought to do in your brewery. Let's do it in my brewery and let's just see what happens. And we just had a ton of fun. I have Evan from Green Cheek is driving up
With some
in
vanilla.
a couple weeks with and the guys from Pint House in Austin are flying in uh, and we're getting together to make this ridiculous banana beer that I don't know how it's going to go, but all I know is I ordered 1,800 pounds of banana and a blowtorch. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. I mean, so now I have to re-up. This is what you're saying. I like that. Um, in
Yeah,
in
exactly.
do I have you for a few more minutes or do you have a hard stop?
Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay. So in this letter that you sent out with the 28th anniversary blend, where you had a good group of people come together and mix some stuff, and then you picked out what you were going to do from various barrels and everything. And I want to talk about that in just half a second. But in this letter that you say that you wrote, and I believe you now, um, you say that you're hitting the outer limits of barrel aged beer. So one, what is that? And then two, the audience for BA beers. I think those of us who came up all at the same time, and you and I are fairly close. Like we used to collect these things. We used to grab them. We used to drink them. We used to dissect them and talk about them. And now we're drinking 805. Um, when we're operating the chainsaw as opposed to, early parabola kind of thing. Um, so the nature of how often the barrel-aged beer fans are drinking those beers, I think is diminishing a little bit. So one, pushing the limits, but two, how do we get new, younger beer drinkers interested in what you're doing here? Because in my mind, this built up where we are right now. You can talk about the IPAs, you can talk about, the brown ales or the milds or anything else, but the barrel aged beers held a special place because of their scarcity, because of their flavor, because of the care that went into them. So one, where is the future? The pushing of the limits, and then two, how do we pull that back to bring new people in to appreciate what we're all appreciating?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I know the answer, but I'll tell you what I think. I mean, the club has allowed us kind of a new day in the barrel aging world because if we were going to rely on broad market, it just wasn't there. I mean, the wholesalers are reluctant to take on more of these types of beers because, oftentimes they're sitting on the shelf too long and they just,
But that's the goose effect, right? I mean, they made so much
maybe,
of it
yeah,
that it gets dusty, and it's like,
yeah.
okay, like it's fine. Like
No,
I
you're right.
appreciate what they're doing, but like,
And so, bringing it back down to a club for us level is very sustainable. And we have this ongoing dialogue with the club members and we send out surveys and they tell us like, yeah, we would love you to do a beer with these adjuncts or, these are the brewers that we're really stoked on. And, it's funny. I've gotten to meet and brew with, folks like Brad from Private Press, who runs, that's all he does, a direct
oh
to
yeah,
consumer, or at least with the Private Press beers. I know he has other brewing stuff going on, but very focused on a direct to consumer.
Sante, yeah.
Horace, Kyle down south, same thing. Got to make some beer with him. Hanuk from maybe it's Hanuk from Omnipolo who could answer that question. I mean, nobody makes barrel aged beers more exciting, and I mean, I visited his brewery in Sweden, and there was a very young, hip crowd in the brewery drinking those beers, and it was packed out. And these are over the top barrel aged beers.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
maybe on the sweeter side of the spectrum, and he's not afraid to like freeze some and throw some frozen on top and do all sorts of crazy effects. But it gets attention, and most importantly, it's drawing in that new generation of drinkers. So I don't know. I learn a little something every time I make beer with one of these, guys or gals, and it's been a really cool learning. I think you just got to be open, and it's a big learning experience, and it's a great sub art form within the brewing world. That I mean, the Fobab was just in Chicago last week,
yeah,
or just this past weekend. I wish I could have been there. And I mean, they're still selling out and drawing a ton of breweries in, and the competition is fierce, and it's alive and well. It's just adjusted to the right size, maybe, but
yeah.
it's doing well.
All right, so I'll give you three last questions. The first one is, when you think about blending, with the experience that you all have now at this point, is there, what do you look for? Like, how do you know when you taste a blend that it's ready for the bottle?
Mm, oof. I mean, the experience has guided us as brewers to this point in um, trying to find those balancing points. And most importantly, if you can put two beers together and make that third element, I always use the example of taking a dark stout and blending it with a barley wine and somehow finding a cherry note. I think
Oh yeah.
that's always a ton of fun and some of the end goals of trying to come up with the right blend. We've just learned a ton through the anniversary experience through local winemakers, and they really focus on texture and trying to make it really interesting in that regard, and tend to shy away from overly bold or roasty or bitter, these types of things. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, I didn't know what the answer was. So yeah. All right. So as I've mentioned now several times, and I'm gonna keep telling I'm just gonna go start ringing my neighbor's doorbells and being, I was drinking paraboloid. Uh 2024, this is 16.5% ABV. Um, and it says it's an imperial stout aged in elite bourbon barrels. Where when I
mm.
look at Parabola, this is the 2024 vintage, number 16, an imperial stout aged in bourbon barrels. So one is bourbon, one is elite bourbon barrels. What makes an elite bourbon barrel?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think just generally speaking, if I'm going to make a 400 barrel batch of Parabola and I need to source bourbon barrels for that, they certainly can't all be Van Winkle barrels or something, that's in short supply. And so we might lean on an 8 year Heaven Hill barrel or something like that for Parabola. Whereas Paraboloid allows us, again, we're making a much smaller batch. We're able to either work through the brokers or directly through distillers and ask for something really unique. Usually that means longer age time, maybe one of their higher end products. Um, is it automatically going to make a better beer? No.
That's what I wanted to know. Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is back to the experience and knowing which distillers to lean on in those cases. And that's where Jay-Z really shines. I mean, he's spending a lot of time focusing on that, talking with the brokers, and mostly most important, talking to other brewers and learning from their experiences with these barrels. We have a great relationship with Revolution Brewing, and Marty and Jim Seebeck there have a ton of experience, and they're, really doing a great job in the Midwest. And again, back to, Brad at Private Press or Kyle at Horace. I mean, you pick up some tips from these guys. And that's what we're just trying to take the very, very best barrels and hold them aside for that release.
When we sat together 5 years ago, um, I didn't really know what I was doing with this show yet, except that I wanted to talk to interesting people and, about interesting things. And you delivered for that first episode, and I thank you for that. And
That was
then the
awesome.
pandemic hit. And during the pandemic, when everybody was in this, oh my gosh, like what's going on? And we're just looking for comfort among chaos and tragedy and sadness and everything. My wife and I started rewatching a television show called The Good Place. And in the final season of that show, they introduce a concept of the green door. And for that show, in that show, the characters can walk through a green door and be anywhere that they want, doing whatever they want. And so I started asking this question post pandemic. So you haven't been on the show to be asked this question yet. So if this conversation ended, when this conversation ended, and you could walk through a green door and be in any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Who would you want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
Oh, you should have prepped me for that. This question. That's a tough
It
one.
kills me that I've
Just
been doing this show for 5 years, Matt. 4.5, I've been asking this question, and you haven't tuned
I don't
in
know why
once.
I
So
didn't
that's
think
fine.
things
That's
would
fine.
play.
Oh, I should have prepped you for a question that I've been asking for 4.5 years on this show. Your marketing team has their finger on the pulse of like, oh, mango's the new thing in Southern California right now. We should get on it. But no, they're not going to give you the heads up on what's on Holl's show. Come on.
Okay, okay. Well, so I had an experience.
Again,
This is
paraboloid.
this is easy. This is
Yeah.
easy. This is easy. I had an experience over the summer where Allison and our kids we flew over and I did a Brewmaster's camp, but it was in Austria. And then afterwards, a good friend of mine, Mario Schultz, who is a hop merchant and a brewmaster grad from Weinsteffen, he'd rented a cabin up in the Austrian Alps, and um, we had a fresh crate that I picked up from the brewery of Schonroner Hell. So Helles, fresh Helles from southern Bavaria. We're in the Alps. It's a clear day. We're sitting out by his off-grid log cabin, just looking out over the Alps. Um, we had finished a hike in the mountains. The kids are there playing. You can hear the bells of the cows ringing off in the distance. And we've got the equivalent of a charcuterie board of sausages and cheeses from the region. I'm drinking a Helles with some of my favorite people, including my family and close friends. That's where I would go through the green door.
I love that. This is Thanksgiving week. Thanks for being on the show. I'm thankful for you and everything that you do for beer, and what you do and you and your team to put it in our glass. So it's good talking to you. I hope it's not 5 years before you come back on the show. Although now I'm probably going to change the question just to trip you up whenever you're on again. Hurtful man. Thanks for doing
John,
this.
it's always a
thanks for taking
pleasure,
the
man.
time.
And I, that first interview in that barrel room with Barry White playing in the background. I mean,
It was magical.
that was other level.
It
That's
was magical. It's the only reason I've made it to 5 years. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
My thanks to Matt. My thanks to you, the listeners, for supporting us over these 5 years. And I hope we keep it going for at least another 5. But how do we make the show better? What do you want? Do you have questions, comments, guest suggestions? It's easy. You can email me. It's John Holl, JOHNHOLL, at allaboutbeer.com. And I do respond to every email. A reminder, go visit allaboutbeer.com. You can check out the podcast page, our merch page. It's holidays are coming up. Go to the merch page and read great new content as well as our archives, which go all the way back to 1979. All About Beer is on social media at All About Beer. And if you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, you can email us at info@allaboutbeer.com to learn about the options, or go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Speaking of that, here is a word from this week's sponsor, Pinter. Ever wanted to brew your own beer, but didn't know where to start? No tubs, no tubes, and no science degree required. Skip the confusion and get straight to the fun with the Pinter. Brew your own fresh beer and impress your friends with craft brews from top breweries like Appalachian Mountain Brewing. It's that easy. This Black Friday, you can grab the Pinter and 2 beer packs. That's 24 pints for just $49. Plus, get free delivery when you go directly to try.pinter.com/DBTB or use the code DRINKBEER49. But hurry, stocks are almost gone for the year, and I've heard they're down to the last few units. Don't miss out. Grab your Pinter today and start brewing your best beer yet. Don't forget, All About Beer has a podcast channel. You can search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and listen to shows like the All About Beer podcast with Don Tess and M. Souter, or the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday. The BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And check out probrewer.com each week for original articles from the All About Beer team. As for this show, Nate Schweber does our music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Holl. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.